Not many people talk about running economy because it's really boring to talk about in general. It takes a long time to improve. But believe it or not, as you get more intermediate and elite and competitive and stuff, the thing that separates great runners from good is running economy. So in this video, we're going to talk about what it is, how to improve it, and some practical tips that you can implement to your training. So what is running economy? Let's talk about it in this video, and essentially it's how efficient you are. So it's how much oxygen it takes for you to run a certain pace. Not everyone is going to have the same running economy, and that's why there's a bit of variety in terms of abilities. For someone, it might not take much to run a certain pace, but for someone else, it might take a lot of energy or oxygen to run that same pace. So you might get two people with the same VO2 max, but they might have different performance levels because of the fact that one of them uses oxygen more efficiently, whereas the other person doesn't. And a good example is to actually compare different sports first of all. So if we look at someone in cross-country skiing, they're known for having a really high VO2 max. But still, even that cross-country skier, if they start running, they're not necessarily going to be the most efficient at using oxygen when they start running, and therefore the runner, even if they have a lower VO2 max than that cross-country skier, they're still going to run quicker than that cross-country skier. Very basic example, but that just shows that VO2 max isn't everything. It's about running economy, how efficiently you're using your oxygen. So it does help to have a better running economy because that means that you can run faster without using as much energy or oxygen. Now, because it is related to how efficiently you use oxygen, it's actually not directly correlated with your running form. So some people may have bad running form, but they can use oxygen very efficiently and they can get away with it. But there is still a correlation between good running form and good running economy. So we need to holistically think about running economy. It's not just a matter of fixing your running form. Let's quickly talk about how running economy is measured. Well, first of all, it's going to be done in a lab because of the fact that it's measuring oxygen consumption and how efficiently you can run with that oxygen consumption. So something like heart rate is never going to be a good indicator of running economy. You may have a low heart rate, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have good running economy, because are you actually using that oxygen and delivering it to your muscles and efficiently getting from point A to point B, or do you just have a low heart rate and that's it? Because that doesn't mean much at all, because heart rate is referring to effort and also fatigue, and also it's influenced by so many factors like hydration, stress, heat, sympathetic tone, parasympathetic tone, caffeine. There's so many factors that come into play, so that's why we don't want to use heart rate as an indicator for running economy. I personally have quite a low heart rate when I go for jogs. Like a lot of the times I'm running with like 100 to 110 heart rate, especially when I'm running like 6 minutes per K or even 5:30 per K. But that doesn't necessarily mean I have the best running economy, because I think that I need to be better at processing the oxygen if I want to be even more efficient. And chances are, if you're not a pro runner or world class, you always have improvements that can be made in terms of running economy. So yeah, it's always good to have an open mindset to improve a lot, and therefore, yeah, there's a long road ahead of us and we all need to work hard to get there. So now let's move on to what most people are probably here for, which is how to improve your running economy. So there's things that we can do which are very high impact, you know, they're gonna give you a lot of gains. And then there's other things that may contribute a little bit and not as much. Maybe they cost a little more as well, so not as good bang for your buck. Starting with the high impact stuff. First thing is consistency, mileage over time. It helps with everything threshold, VO2 max, and as well as running economy. As you run more, you're teaching your body what the most efficient way to get from point A to point B is without using as much energy as when you first start running. When you first start running, you're not going to be that efficient. You're not going to have the capillarization. You're not going to have the central adaptations, the peripheral adaptations, and your body doesn't have enough stimulus to know that it needs to be using that oxygen. So there's a few other factors which I probably don't even know how to explain happening in the body, which aren't helping out with using that oxygen efficiently. But the more you do it, the more you're gonna trigger those stimulus and therefore adaptation, and you're gonna get more efficient over time. So there's nothing replacing consistency over time. As you run for years and years, you're gonna get more economical with your running, and that's why in a few years time, you will definitely be more efficient at running. That's kind of a boring one because that takes a long time, but you do have to get it done. Let's move on to something that may help a little more in the medium term, so you might see the results from it a little bit quicker. But again, not everyone's going to get a lab test in terms of running economy, so it's not really a quantifiable thing for most of us, including myself. I personally don't want to pay money just to find out my running economy. I'd rather just focus on improving my running economy arbitrarily, so like not actually quantifying it. So one thing I want to talk about in this video is strength training, because in the medium term, it can give you quite a lot of gains in terms of running economy if you do the right thing. And one of the reasons why this is the case is because each step requires a certain amount of force and we all know that. And that amount of force is not going to change just because you get fitter. But if you do strength training, how hard we have to work to produce that force is going to decrease. Obviously, if you get stronger, then that sub-maximal force is going to feel easier. Same thing as threshold. If your top end speed is quicker, then yes, your threshold is probably going to feel a little easier, and you can push that threshold over time as well. So with strength, we're trying to get stronger so that the force required to run is way less effort for us, even though we might even need to produce more force in the future if we're running quicker as well, right? So that's why strength training is actually important. You need to be lifting heavy and also doing plyometrics, because plyometrics is utilizing your stretch shortening cycle of the tendon, because the tendons are this elastic thing. Like your Achilles tendon is the best example of this, but it's very springy, right? So you can give that tendon that tensile force and then that release, and it's going to spring you to your next step. And the more we can utilize that, because that doesn't require any energy, that's more of a biomechanical thing. We want to utilize that tendon complex as much as possible, and therefore you're not using as much oxygen. So plyometrics, being able to bounce really well and be springy, is a huge way to save running economy. So that's why plyometrics is actually super important if you want to improve your running economy. And I haven't personally done that much, so I actually want to get more strict with doing plyometrics, because I think that's the next thing I need to do to get a step forward as well. Because now I'm working on my speed, I feel quick again, but I don't feel as bouncy, I don't feel as springy. So plyometrics is the way to go for me now. So the third factor which can have a huge impact on your running is short, fast running. So we're talking hill strides, like running quick, top end speed, that kind of thing. That is going to obviously improve your neuromuscular connection, so your mind-muscle connection, being able to go from point A to point B a lot more efficiently, hopefully utilizing a bit more of the plyometric capability of your tendons, stretch shortening cycle, and therefore you don't require as much oxygen to travel from point A to point B when you're doing sub-maximal efforts, and therefore your running economy will improve a little bit there. So that's why doing strides is actually really important. If you want to become more of an efficient runner, you're going to have to do strides, and I think that will help you go a long way. I made a full video on strides already, so I'm not going to go into detail on that, but again, try and make sure you vary the intensity, the terrain, the incline. So do different hills, and sometimes on the flat, sometimes do it on the grass, sometimes do it on the concrete, sometimes go a little bit quicker, sometimes go a little bit more conservative and accelerate. So depending on how you feel, just adjust it on the day. So now we're going to move on to the stuff that don't impact as much, but they may still impact a little bit. And the first one is a little bit controversial, but I'm only mentioning it for the sake of completeness for this video, and so that people also understand. And if I can get this one thing clear for people, I will feel like I've done my job. So I still want to mention this. So the first thing I'm going to say in terms of like stuff that may help with running economy a little bit is weight. But I want you to remember all the time that it's about functional versus non-functional weight. So if you lose a lot of non-functional weight, aka fat, that's probably going to help with your running economy. It's not going to cost as much energy or oxygen to travel from point A to point B. But if we're losing muscle mass and functional weight, I don't think that's going to contribute to better running economy. So weight loss is very controversial to talk about in general, but it is very context dependent. So I want you guys to always remember that you don't want to sacrifice functional weight for performance. I would happily gain like 2 kgs of muscle and become a stronger runner, but obviously I don't really want to gain more fat. So I think that's the point that I'm trying to make clear. And in terms of how to lose body weight and stuff like that safely and all that, I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a dietitian, so I want you to talk to someone that's really qualified with that. And someone you can talk to is Gabby Villa. I trust her with all my heart. I think she does really good content for the community and also really good work and supports a lot of good athletes and also athletes of all abilities. So yeah, hit her up. And the other thing is shoe technology. Obviously, when we have shoes like this, which weigh absolutely nothing at all, it's super duper light, and also it's very bouncy with the different foams that we got nowadays, ATP, TPE, PIBA. Like, we're gonna get more economical in terms of our running form if we wear the right shoe for our biomechanics. So not everyone's running form is gonna work well with one particular shoe, which is why there's so many shoes out there and everyone responds differently to every shoe. But there will be a shoe out there that will make you more economical in terms of running, but it also costs a lot of money, and also you're gonna get way bigger gains from actually improving your strength, your plyometrics, your hill sprints, your strides, your consistent mileage over time. Like, that's gonna trump this any day. So this is more of a 1%er, but it does improve your running economy a little bit as well. So, how do we know whether our running economy has improved over time? The first thing we can look at is the same pace feeling a lot easier, because over time, when you look back like 2 or 3 months ago, if you were coming back from an injury or whatever, you'll especially notice that the same pace definitely feels way easier. Now that you've become more efficient again at using the oxygen, you've added the stimulus, you've done the mileage, you've been consistent, you've done all the other tips that I mentioned about in this video. And the other thing could be, your breathing rate is lower, so you're not needing to breathe as hard and get the oxygen in to use the oxygen well. So yeah, you're just kind of cruising at a faster pace sort of thing. So that's kind of tied to, same pace feeling easier, I guess. We can look at heart rate as well. Like I said earlier in the video, it's not directly correlated, but there is some sort of correlation. So if your heart rate is significantly lower after a certain period at the same pace compared to the same conditions before, then yes, you probably got some running economy benefits there as well. But just keep in mind that you need to be comparing exactly the same conditions, which is really hard to do. So like, did you take caffeine on that previous day? Did you take caffeine this time? Was it just as hot and humid this time compared to last time? Like, all these factors you need to consider. So that's why heart rate, I wouldn't obsess over it too much, but if we look at long-term trends and multiple data points, then you might notice, yes, your heart rate is trending lower over time at the same pace sort of thing. So don't make it the be-all end-all, but it's still something we can correlate field to data with, basically. And finally, just being able to maintain the pace when things get tired later into the run. So the back half of a marathon, the people that have the best running economy will probably be able to hold pace a lot better than someone that doesn't have good running economy, because they're going to crumble and fall apart. Those are a few things that I would look out for, but again, they're not really quantifiable because we're not all going to pay and go into the lab and get everything tested. So you just need to think of wanting to improve running economy and just doing everything that I said in this video. And you don't really have to measure it to become a better runner. You're still going to become a better runner if you do work on running economy. So now let's talk about running economy, VO2 max, and threshold. And the way these three sort of interact is how we look at running performance in general. It's important to remember though that threshold and VO2 max is more of an intensity thing, and running economy is actually just how efficient you are at that intensity. So running economy is nothing to do with a certain intensity or anything like that. But to recap what VO2 max means, VO2 max is the highest rate of oxygen consumption that you can consume at a high intensity, whereas threshold is obviously more referring to, that period right before your lactate spikes, so where you can clear the lactate just about as quickly as you're producing it. But yeah, you're probably producing a little bit more of excess at that point if you're at threshold, because it is obviously the point right before that inflection point. So there is that little bit of accumulation, but not that exponential accumulation. So your running economy at VO2 max and your running economy at threshold is what we're kind of looking at. So as you get fitter and fitter and fitter and more competitive, the thing that will separate people apart is how efficient you are at given intensities. A lot of people say whoever's running the fastest velocity at threshold is going to win the race, and that's actually quite true. If the race isn't tactical and it's like a time trial sort of race, everyone's trying to run super quick. So again, remember, it's not necessarily who has the lowest lactate at a given point, it's more velocity, how fast you're running at threshold is a good indicator. And when we look at the shorter races like the 5K, the 3K, the 1500, VO2 max becomes important as well. How fast can you run at VO2 max? That is an important factor. So running economy at VO2 max, running economy at threshold, very important stuff to remember. And also, I do want to mention that running economy is one thing that not many people will talk about because it is really boring at a surface level, because it takes years to improve. Because if we look at VO2 max versus threshold versus running economy, what improves the quickest? VO2 max is the quickest to improve. You only need like a 6 to 8 week block of quality speed sessions and you're going to improve your VO2 max a fair amount, especially compared to running economy. Running economy takes years to improve. Threshold somewhere in the middle. So yeah, that's why running economy kind of boring to talk about, but it is important when you're looking long term in your running career. Just so that there's no confusion though, I do want to mention that you're basically working on your running economy and threshold and VO2 max most of the time together. It's not something you work on separately, they come hand in hand. Obviously, you might not be doing a VO2 max block the whole year round, but especially stuff like threshold and running economy, you're working on it year round and they all interplay and help each other out. So to summarize this entire video, running economy is pretty boring. It's subtle, it's slow to improve, but you're just going to feel easier running a given pace in the future, and you may not necessarily feel faster, but you'll feel more efficient. So it's about efficiency, and that's what running economy is. So as always, thank you so much for watching this video. As usual, there's a buy me a coffee link in the description. That's your easy way to support the channel. I'm a student and it really helps me get by when people support, even if it's just a little donation. So yeah, thank you so much for your support. Leave a like, comment below what you want me to make a video on next, and I'll see you in the next video.